I am allergic to the sun. This is what it's like. Molly, 44, was diagnosed with a sunlight allergy, called polymorphous light eruption (PLME), when she was a young girl. This is what it's like to have to take precautions every time she steps outside. Since I was diagnosed so young, I don't really remember life before my sunlight allergy. My earliest memories are of my parents being very careful with me in the sun, and I just continued to be vigilant as I got older, especially because I came to know what happens when I'm not. When I'm exposed to sunlight, I often get a rash that bubbles. It's very uncomfortable, itchy, and annoying. It becomes intolerable when I get sun poisoning, which is accompanied by blisters, dehydration, nausea, and a fever. For me, a rash typically lasts for a week. The thing is, the rash won't just appear on the areas that have had sun contact. Even if just my face gets exposure, the rash will crop up on my neck, chest, and arms. Growing up in Michigan, it wasn't exactly like I was missing beach parties. But now it makes beach vacations unenjoyable, and really, I just avoid them altogether. But a few years ago, when I was visiting the sites in Chile, I stumbled upon the most beautiful beach I had ever seen. I knew the risks, but I couldn't resist jumping into the water. I applied sunscreen beforehand and put on a hat as soon as I got out, but those 2 hours in the ocean were long enough to give me one of the worst outbreaks I'd ever had. It was awful and also a little worth it. Now, if I planned on going swimming, I would probably buy a bikini, a modest swimsuit often worn by Muslim women. What causes a sunlight allergy? Some women get PLME from hormonal changes or antibiotics, in which case the allergy can go away. I, like many fair-skinned people, was born with a genetic susceptibility, which means I'll always have it. People with milder PLME are only affected during the summer months, but my case is more severe. If I'm not precautious, I could easily get a rash in December. As far back as I can remember, I was pretty obsessive about putting on sunscreen. But this still doesn't mean I can sunbathe all day. There are different options now that can lessen the effects. One is a UV treatment that can be done at a dermatologist's office. They progressively give you higher treatments of UV light over the course of 3 to 6 months, and it's supposed to acclimate your skin to the sun over time. There's also a French product called sun intolerance cream, which is supposed to adjust your body to sun exposure to prevent burning and rashes. You are supposed to begin applying it 2 weeks before having increased sun exposure. For example, I am going to St. Thomas for a wedding in January, and I will start wearing it in December. Of course, once I'm there, I'll wear regular sunscreen as well. I use Neutrogena because their formulas contain Helioplex technology that makes them really strong. Taking daily precautions. Wearing sunscreen and applying it multiple times a day is part of my daily routine. I wear a hat during the daylight hours and use a parasol when I go outside. I might not stand out so much if I lived in Thailand, but I live in Michigan. The thing that is a bit strange about my condition is that people don't typically comment or stare at the rash itself, but they are more likely to acknowledge the precautions I take. I can tell you how many times a child has felt the need to explain to me that umbrellas are for the rain. I also wear a sun mask on the rare occasions that I know I'm going to be out and it's going to be too hot for sunscreen to stay on. That's what gets me the weirdest comments. Since people usually don't associate umbrellas or sun masks with a medical issue, they think it's socially acceptable to comment on it. Most dermatologists have told me that PLME is very common and doesn't really have a correlation with increased risk of skin cancer. Yet others have said that because my case is especially severe, as well as genetic, that my risk is elevated. However, the risk would be associated with how many times I actually let sun damage my skin, which is really the case for people with and without PLME. Since I'm very careful, and rarely get the rash, I'm not at all worried about getting skin cancer. Name has been changed.